see what kind of debris we get from this spot in the transmission. Notice we have a 14 tooth starter clutch gear here. This will have to be changed out for the 16 tooth. That's a procedure to be performed by a very experienced Harley-Davidson transmission mechanic. This can actually be the weak link in the chain if that starter clutch breaks loose from the taper on the end of the main shaft, and obviously can destroy the main shaft as well. So we want to be sure we have a capable mechanic who performs the changeover here of the starter clutch and the starter clutch gear. We may as well test the spring pressure prior to disassembly too. Of course, we'll get a new spring that will work correctly with the offshore starter clutch components that we'll use. They'll work fine because the right side starter pushes straight on the face of the gear, doesn't cock it sideways and wear out the bushing like the original setup did. Even if this was the 16 tooth starter clutch assembly, we need to be sure that it's secure, that it hasn't already been loose and rocking on the end of the main shaft, as we have found this to be the case. It will be very difficult to tell without taking the nut off, and as all of us tranny guys know, this is the worst freaking keeper in the drawer. Regardless, we need to ensure, again, even if it's in good shape and it's a 16 tooth and the spring is not too stout, that it hasn't been rocking on the shaft and we put the electric start on and we tear it loose. Another note about the offshore parts, although they work fine, again, because of the straight-on push to the face of the gear, I've seen some variations in where the taper, the size of the taper, and where the starter clutch itself is going to end up on the main shaft. Be careful it doesn't go on so deep that it's out of the range of allowing the right side starter to function. If you put a straight edge across the transmission case, there shouldn't be more than a 1/16 of an inch to the face of that gear. Pulling the kicker cover, we found the 14 tooth starter clutch gear. We have to replace it with the much more common 16 tooth. Also found a 2-keyed starter clutch. So this 1960 Duo Glide has an original 2-keyway main shaft in it, along with those are the couple of years that they used this 14 tooth gear. Very difficult to pull. I've got a puller that I made from a block of hot rolled. This very difficult to pull. I use a penny to prevent damage to the end of the main shaft with my puller. Once I did get it apart, you want to take a good look and observe how well the starter clutch itself was mated to the taper on the main shaft. And it could be better, and I'm going to reuse the 2-key starter clutch because you can only get a 1-key. This part is fine, matches the main shaft, will work fine with the 16 tooth replacement starter clutch gear. We're going to use the new spring, the replacement spring as well. It has the right tension and hooks firmly to the back of the gear. we're going to use the original keys and the keyways, measuring up with a replacement key. They're about 4 or 5 thousandths wider, and if you were to follow the manual, it says to fit the starter clutch on the shaft and then drive in the keys. The nut and the lock, the worst lock in the Harley's book, if you ask me. Very difficult. You can see how this is barely chewed up at the edge. Very difficult to bend over the nut. And the torque, the Panhead manual just says don't tighten it to pull this face closer than 5/8 of an inch to the face of the transmission. It says don't over tighten, pretty vague. I believe correct is 50 to 55 foot-pounds. Double check that, please. This is just an India stone I used to deburr the edges of the keyways on the main shaft. They were razor sharp. This is valve lapping compound. I'm going to take a little lapping compound and I'm going to lap the two tapers together until I get what I believe is good contact, and I'm going to check that. This is some high spot blue, some Prussian blue that we'll apply and see how good of a contact we get between the two tapers. After it's all together, I will check the distance from the face of this gear to the face of the transmission by holding my Starrett scale across the face like this, checking to the face of this. There should be no more than the thickness of a penny in that spot. And that's my 2 cents worth on starter clutches.